Hey guys, this is Zach Steele here, bringing you a Week 6 waiver wire video. Note this is recorded on Monday prior to Monday night's game and Tuesday night's game, should it happen. So anything that happens in those games, if anything major happens there, I'll be sure to update this video in the comments about new guys I like. But let's just get started. So first, here's a list of 3 quarterbacks I love to add this week that are all under 50% owned. Number 1 here for me is Teddy Bridgewater. They've really, it almost feels like they've opened up that offense without McCaffrey out there. I think they've figured out they've got a really talented receiving core and apparently a dual threat at running back or two-headed monster once McCaffrey's back, because Mike Davis has been absolutely phenomenal. I expect that offense to score a lot of points, and Bridgewater's looked good, and I think he's a guy that you're not playing him every week, but every week he's got a decent matchup. I think he's got a great shot to finish at the top 10 of the position, so I definitely look to add Bridgewater. Another guy here is Derek Carr. I think he was QB1 this week in fantasy. They beat the Chiefs. Derek Carr's looked really good. Henry Ruggs had a good showing. And the couple bad games they've had, Waller and Jacobs have been banged up. So really, I do think that Raiders offense is better than a lot of people are giving it credit for. And Derek Carr has had a solid start to the year, and I think he's a guy that you can play in plus matchups. So he's a guy that's worth rostering. Another guy here is Ryan Fitzpatrick. The man keeps producing. He keeps scoring points. He absolutely dominated a 49ers defense this week. And I really like his receiving options. He's got Gesicki, who's played really well at tight end. Myles Gaskin's looking great at running back. And combination of Parker, Williams, and Ford at receiver is actually pretty solid. So I like Fitzpatrick. They've got a bad defense. So in general, they're going to be playing from behind. He'll need to chuck it around. So Fitzpatrick's in line for a lot of garbage time work a lot of weeks. So he's a great ad. At running backs here, I'll start with the obvious one. If Dalvin Cook misses any time at all, you have to roster Alexander Mattison. He carved up the Seahawks yesterday. I want to say he had 117 receiving yards and like 5 targets. So I mean, he's one of the few running backs that I don't think is a whole lot worse than his starting running back. Obviously, Dalvin Cook is better, but I don't feel like that offense really misses a beat with Madison versus Cook. And when Cook is out, Madison is a top 10 running back, really similar to how we're seeing Mike Davis just dominate with McCaffrey out. I think you could see the same kind of thing for as many games as Cook misses. Another guy here a lot of people are forgetting about is Damian Harris for the Patriots. He had 17 rushes for 100 yards last Monday, and their game got canceled this week, which obviously that sucks. And you didn't get to see him this week. But if he didn't get picked up this last week, you're getting a starting running back who looked decent and now is out of his bye, so you don't have to worry about that the rest of the season. So he's totally worth adding. Another guy here I've got is Chase Edmonds. He has been on the field for I want to say 37 snaps, or he's got 37 touches versus Kenyon Drake's like 90, and he's outscored him in fantasy. He's just been the better player on the field. I don't know if Kenyon Drake is hurt. I know he was in a walking boot earlier this preseason and all that, but Edmonds has looked better and Drake has looked bad, and it seems like Edmonds is just working his way more and more into the rotation there. And the Cardinals showed last year they're willing to move on from their starting running back for a guy that looks better. They did it with David Johnson for Drake last year, and I won't be shocked to see Edmonds take over as the lead back as the season goes on. So if he's still on waivers, you have to roster him. Justin Jackson, obviously we haven't seen him play tonight, but he's going to have a role in that offense for as long as Eckler's out, and I would sure sounds like it's going to be at least 6 weeks for Eckler. And with all the COVID stuff and all the buys coming up, you can't pass up an opportunity to get a really playable running back. I think he'll be a guy that you can play, and you're not going to get a goose egg out of Jackson as long as Eckler's out. So he's definitely a nice asset to be holding on to. And McKissick for the Washington football team. He continues to be the running back there that's the most involved in the passing game. They're losing all the time, so they've got to throw the ball. He's getting a lot of targets. He's a nice flex play if you need one on a week-to-week basis. He's going to get you some points, and it seems like he's getting more involved, and he was really involved with Alex Smith in there. So as long as we see that, I think McKissick's in line for some decent production. This is the fun list for me. Obviously, Claypool had a monster game for a rookie. I know I highlighted him earlier in this series, but I mean, I get it. Deontay Johnson was out, so it's hard to say how involved he'll be. But the Steelers aren't stupid. They saw how dominant he was. They're going to get him the ball more. I'm not going to go as far as to say he vaulted his way ahead of Juju and Deontay Johnson, but like you could make a case that Chase Claypool is the number one receiver in Pittsburgh rest of the season, especially if Deontay Johnson misses time with that back injury. And he's an explosive play waiting to happen. You've got to roster him and probably start him in all leagues. Another guy I've been really high on, and I still am, is Laviska Shenault. He paced the team in targets this week. I want to say he had 7 receptions for 80 yards. They're just looking to get him the ball, and he's a rookie. Obviously, the Jaguars aren't a very good team, so they want to get their young guys work so they can develop them. Chenault's going to be more and more involved as the season goes on, and he's a guy that he's going to have some big games. He's an explosive player. He breaks tackles. He makes people miss. Really runs nice routes. He's got good hands. So I think you have to roster Shenault, and I think he's a top 30 receiver on the season, and he's somehow just hardly owned. I know it's not a sexy pick to own a Jaguar, and arguably not even the number one receiver on that team because of DJ Chark, but he's someone you have to roster, and I don't mind playing as a flex every week. Another guy here is Travis Fulgham. He's had 2 straight really good games for the Eagles, and this last week he was a monster. He had 10 receptions for 152 yards and a touchdown, and I know the argument is that there's just a lot of injuries and he's going to lose a lot of snaps, but to be banking on Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson to be healthy doesn't seem like the right way to approach things. I think you're more likely to see them banged up the rest of the season than you are to see them healthy. And the Eagles need warm bodies that can catch the ball, and Fulgham has proven that he can do that. He's going to get a lot of work. Wentz seems to trust him. And as long as they can't get the ball to Ertz, who just looks like a shell of himself, I think Fulgham's in line for a lot of work. Another guy here, Brandon Cooks. He finally had his coming out party with the Texans. 8 receptions, 162 yards, and a touchdown. I don't think that's the kind of production you're going to see week to week, but Cooks is a really good player with a really good quarterback throwing in the ball, and he's owned in like 44% of leagues on ESPN, and that just doesn't make sense to me. I know he had an awful start to the season, but Bill O'Brien's gone now, and they look better. I won't be shocked to see Cooks lead that team in yards and touchdowns and receptions the rest of the season. I believe he's a better player than Will Fuller, and I think he's less likely to get hurt. So roster Cooks, and I have no problem playing him week to week because he's so explosive. And lastly, I'm not as high on this guy as I have the other 4, but Tim Patrick's looked really good for the Broncos. I know their game, similar to Damian Harris earlier, got canceled due to COVID with the Patriots, but that means he's out of his bye, so you don't have to navigate that, and you might be getting in the number one receiver for an offense. Nobody's really separated themselves among the pack there. I know people love Jerry Jeudy, and Hamler's getting a lot of high remarks, but Tim Patrick's looked the part, and I'm not opposed to throwing him in as a flex. There's just a nice bench option down, so go get Tim Patrick. Tight ends here. For some reason, the Colts just refuse to acknowledge that Mo Alie-Cox is their best tight end. Trey Burton has led the team, or the tight ends and targets and routes run the last 2 weeks, and I think he had 5 catches this last week. And for as bad as the tight end position has been this season, if you can get a tight end in this game, that kind of volume, do it. Robert Tonyan, you don't need me to bring up him. He had 3 touchdowns last week. Packers just had their bye, so you're through that. I've got a guy in my league that's likely starting him over Zach Ertz this next week. I don't think that's necessarily wrong. So I like Robert Tonyan. I don't think he's going to be the monster you saw on Sunday or last Monday, but he's going to be a good asset. He's still probably a touchdown dependent tight end, but so is everybody outside the top 5, it seems like. So I'd like to roster Tonyan. Eric Ebron continues to find himself more involved for the Steelers, and especially with Deontay Johnson out, there's more targets to go around. So I really like Ebron. I know he's big on touchdowns, and that's normally been his staple, but he had 5 catches this last week. So he's giving you a nice floor, regardless of whether or not he falls in the end zone. And if he does, he's going to have a great week. Lastly, Gerald Everett. I've never been super high on Higbee because of Everett. Everett is a very talented tight end. He does a lot with the ball in his hands. He creates a lot of yards after the catch, and the Rams are starting to get him the ball more. He had 90 yards this last week. I think he's just another one of those guys that you're not loving to start every week, but he's somebody that you can play on a week in, week out basis, and he's not going to give you a goose egg, and he's got potential for a massive game. Yeah. So that's pretty much it for week 6, the waiver wire. It's a pretty dry week because obviously a lot of those guys are probably owned in your leagues already. And if they are, I would advise you don't feel bad about just standing pat and waiting for people to drop their guys. You'd be amazed by how much people overreact on a week-to-week basis and what gets dropped on waivers. I've heard things about Kenyon Drake or DJ Moore getting dropped ahead of this last week. I wouldn't be shocked if somebody dropped Michael Gallup this week because he's been bad and now they don't have Dak. So just keep an eye out. Make sure you check your waiver wire come Wednesday morning because fantasy owners overreact and drop their guys a lot. That's pretty much all. If you like this video, please sure to give me a like, hit that thumbs up button. Please give me a subscribe. I'm trying to put out a lot of content and just getting started. Tomorrow we'll get a trade video up and we'll talk about players to target ahead of week 6. That's pretty much it. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.